It's a very low turnout. I know Kenyans will normally wait until last minute to come out. So your last minute now is now because we are closing on 2nd of November.
So this last minute, from the beginning, when we had a sluggish start, the commissioners kept saying that, Kenyans are last minuters and we expect to get a huge numbers towards the end. Yesterday morning, one of the commissioners was in one of the interviews on our show and said, even that last minute rush that they expected is not there this time round. So you've both said 2007 worked well, 2013 worked well. What did we do? And you've talked about Vijana Tugutuke in 2007. 2013 came just after post-election violence, but still they were able to cop up quite a considerable number of new voters into their list. Yeah. So what is the disconnect here, Mugambi?
So the disconnect is as follows. In 2013, we had a new constitution. There's a fresh promise that things would change, that the election managers would give us an election that's free, fair, credible, that politicians now would be held accountable. Remember, there was a sea change. So you don't need to market too much. And then the political class was invested in that election because some of them had to survive the ICC process. So all those added up to huge numbers. Even now, I tell you, if IBC engage civil society, engage business community, donors, religious groups, you would find easily between 1.5 and 2 billion extra shillings by 3 days after that engagement. Because people just need to believe that this is fundamental to change for the business community. Of course, it's fundamental to change. They're the ones who are crying about high debt, high taxation. Of course, all of us want to believe. But if you're being treated like you're begging, like you are outsiders, you're not being treated as partners, and that's what the youth are saying. You don't treat me like you own the place. Treat me like a shareholder. So talk to me as a shareholder in a language I understand, through people I understand. Then, big step that was missed by ABC, explaining to the youth why they must vote. I come from a human rights background. And as Joshua said, it's based on Article 1, Article 38, Article 91, which all tell you your vote, kura yako, haki yako.
It's your right.
Now, if you sleep on your rights, who do you think will come and give you your rights? You see, we've changed the narrative. If you sleep on your rights, if you don't vote, the same old nonsense of broken promises goes on. If you don't vote, the same old nonsense of bad roads, lack of water, high taxes, high debt, you make people see what is in it for them. Has that happened? At least as far as I know, and I am very intimately a part of elections and governance. That conversation was never initiated by ABC, not by government, not by political parties. In fact, political parties are saying, come out because my opponent has higher numbers. When has being in government helped the people at the bottom? In fact, those are the ones who complain the most, that we elected someone, he told us not to let him down, and cynicism is based on the fact that you create asymmetry in terms of ownership.
Right.
That there are owners and then there's the rest of us. What you create is shareholding. So the methodology, the content, and then the outcomes improve.
One of the commissioners, Changwon, spoke on, I think, Sunday, and said that they're hoping that this particular process will be extended in colleges and universities, that he visited one and could see long queues. So then the other argument is we are conducting enhanced voter registration exercise when the bigger chunk of the young people are in institutions. But then you'll tell them that then they will have to go vote in the village. How do we bridge that?
Yes, as my brother Mugambi has illustrated very well, on the unhappiness by the youth of this country. Allow me illustrate and go back, because facts don't lie, they just speak. In 2013 elections, the campaign was centered around promises to the youth of this country. And you remember very well how the youth of this country were promised the 6 billion in case there was not going to be a rerun. And of course, you can see the vote mobilization that was done in that election year. Where is the 6 billion? Can the youth now connect to that promise? It's nowhere. It's neither here nor there. I mean, we can't trace it and say This was the life promise that you are given in this particular election year. And when you look at it very critically, from 2007, even from previous elections, the language of campaigns in this country have been made to be youth-friendly. I think in 2007...
We're even seeing that now.
Yes, even in 2007, you know, the language that was used then, because the youth were, as my brother Mugambi is saying, that artists are so powerful in terms of mobilizing the youth. Look at the language of unbreakable. You know, that was so resonating with the youth. And the politicians hijacked this. Even this language of hustling, I know my brother here was joking with me that he no longer used that but who coined this? The youth. So the politicians have also come again to hijack it. And I'm saying this without any attack of anyone. Even the Gutuka, you know, narratives around there. So I think it has reached a time where now the youth of this country have realized that, wait a minute, I think it is about putting us in the box, and there's nothing for us in that box. It is about a club of people who would just use a language to woo us in a particular direction, but there's nothing that is good for us. But as you ask that, what can we do differently from these observations that we are seeing now here? I think we should go back to the drawing board and say the elections in this country is actually the axis of development for our country, because that is where we begin by having people who are going to determine the kind of the laws through the parliament, the different legislatures that we have, whether it's the county assembly, the national assembly, and the senate. Because those are people we put there on our behalf. They legislate, they oversight, and they represent us. And if we don't think carefully of the quality of the people that we put in these houses, we will never get the value of our vote. So we must rethink and say, this vote is about our lives. It is not about the politician's life to ascend to political office. It is about us and not any other person. It's about our country and the generations that are to come, whom we are supposed to prepare a good place for them, where they will always remember us that we made good decisions. So it's not about giving up on our country, but it is about rethinking about the course on what we can do better as Kenyans, regardless of age and regardless of where we come from in this country.
And that's why I ask Joshua, even if we rethink, even if we follow them to the virtual spaces, even if we use these artists to communicate to them on the importance of voting or registering as voters, or even being engaged in this electoral process, our state of affairs remains as is. Will you still cop up the numbers you hope for?
Yes, why not? Why not when Kenyans, if they are determined, like now, for instance, let me give an example. There was a year in this country when anger struck the northern part of this country, and you remember how Red Cross mobilized us and how much amount of money did we raise? It was not about having Kenyans just to remove money that was idle from somewhere. 10 shillings, 5 shillings, and you can imagine the kind of the resources that Kenyans pulled for the sake of the northern part of this country to fight hunger. It is the same cause. It is the inspiration that we need for our people in order to come out and say we are owning this process, we are participating, we are not being prevented from any kind of accessibility to information or any right that we are supposed to exercise. And at the end of it all, we would want to see results and fruits of the same. So if that, and of course my brother here was mentioning around the enlightenment of the voter. Yeah. Because if you make the person to be knowledgeable, that I'm acquiring this status of registering as a voter, it's not even just the end. Because if my details are in the voters register, there will be an opportunity to come and verify my details of the voters register. So I must come out and say, are my details the same as it is appearing in my national identity card or my valid passport, so that I'm eligible to come and vote during the election, you know, that kind of stuff. Then I think the last bit is this. The citizen is supposed to be enabled to know that as I exercise my democratic role in the ballot, by casting the ballot, the outcome of that, casting of the ballot must be a reward whereby I'm having people who will come and serve me, not people who will come and desert me, as we've seen in the past elections.
Mugambi, your thoughts on that?
Yes. You see, and I like the term Joshua used, reward. So, when you're talking to the youth, if they see a reward, they're coming. How do you know that? How do the betting companies make money?
The reward system.
You go into Fuliza so that you can bet. You go into Tala and the small apps. Apathy is based on A, ignorance, and the fact that you cannot see a reward. And reward can be both negative or positive. As we said, if the message is by not voting, mutakaa kwa hizo masafa. The same problems you had yesterday, right? Or by voting tomorrow, you will get one of them is promising bottom up, or the other one is promising 6,000 for the lowest of the low. If you can show them that they're coming out, because you see people engaging in debt. So, and I keep on saying this, what IBC, for me, the challenge they've had is that they took the cattle to the river. They did not explain to the cattle that by drinking that water, it's a life and death situation. And that's not hard. It's not hard. Because the thirst comes from the first sip. And if the first sip comes from the influence of a cow, that's someone you trust. Yeah. I'm not even sure who the big influencers in this country are, but in the digital era, it will happen. Most likely it's Eric Omondi or whomever and you pick a number of them that speak the language of this youth. Language is very important. You do not want them to feel patronized. And that's why I'm very hesitant to blame the victim. The youth, we have not told our stories of success. They normally hear about Vijana Tukutuke. They actually had no clue what then it achieved. Because of the youth voting, the numbers meant that those who had promised change were at the table negotiating. Yes, maybe they didn't get the result you actually wanted, but there was change. And because of that negotiation, you got a new constitution. You got that Mkatenusu government. If you actually look at it objectively, is the most, in terms of progressive change, yes, that came from the youth. My last point about the youth is the following. Change in Kenya has always come with a youth generation. So you'll hear about, for example, the Momo generation, or the independence, the Uhuru generation, the young Turks. They were called young. Why? Why were they called young? Tugutuke was young, right? He's talking about even 2013. This so-called hustler is young. Why do you think hustler is so popular? Because they're speaking the language. But the youth themselves mobilize and say, we can't live like this anymore. There is that reward has been triggered in their minds. It's a consciousness. It is not money. Then
I wonder, will this reflect in 2022 polls?
Now,
general apathy, do you expect
so what it tells me is, if you continue doing, it's Einstein. Insanity is doing the same thing, the same way,
again,
and expecting a different result. Right now, the only people who can do, under the Constitution, the mandate to carry out voter registration is IBC. If they think by doing what they did in this enhanced period, you get change, I am afraid it will not work. If they change tack, they wake up tomorrow and say, you know what, let's talk. Let's talk to these communities. Let's talk to these sectors. Let's engage Kenyans. The resources they're crying about will happen instantly. The youth that they want will come instantly. Yeah. As I said, if I have a concert in Nyayo Stadium today, and I tell the youth of Nairobi, those in Kibra, those in Kangware, those in Kangemi, those in Mathare, Dandora, I tell them, listen, all you need to do, come with your voter's card or your ID, and we'll register you there. Are you telling me you will not get the sizes we saw in 2007? I am not persuaded, by that, the denial of that. What I see is that on that day, a Saturday most likely, it will be packed. Why? In fact, there was a cartoon the other day that youth, they're not going for COVID vaccinations. Youth, you know, we have told them to go and register, they're not going. But as soon as our president opened up the clubs, the youth are where? Why are we missing that lesson? It's not apathy. There's things they find rewarding. Partying rewards the youth. It is so simple. I myself, because I've been in this before, I totally appeal to IBC. Open your eyes. Let the scales drop. Actually, we're not even trying to be critical. We're trying to be helpful. We're offering you something constructive. We're giving you examples of how it could work. But no one, and they know my number. Jemkwete knows my number. So does Marianne, and a number of commissioners. No one has talked to some of us who have been there before. I'll take the blame in a certain way. This narrative of success has never been told. And that's our fault as civil society, as media. I will own that. But for heaven's sake, let's not do the blame game of it's you, no, it is what can we do before February 2022. And it can happen, I assure you.
Let's take a look at what some of the, our respondents here or our audiences are saying on our social media platforms. Nyedia says, their mode of registration is outdated and archaic. M-Pesa agents register millions within a short period of time at a low cost. Make it digital. You've spoken to...
I've spoken to that. We've spoken to that. It is, again, imagination. Imagination. Understanding the demographic.
Anjohi Wagivinje says, hi Akisa, the lethargy and apathy among in voters registration is because of one, lack of serious commitment from leaders to solve key issues affecting Kenyans, and two, Kenyans have been taken for a ride for way too long and expect even low turnouts even in election day. Joshua, you expect the same? Low voter turnout in election day?
No, the dynamics are most likely to change because the narratives around the voter registration will be different from you know, the participation in the election day. I see other contributions, you know, I mean, putting in place more voters to submit themselves for the elections. And in this country, we have 22 counties that are going for a succession election, where the current governors are not eligible to, you know, seek political office. And then this position of the member of the county assembly is attracting so many people currently, and the mobilization of the vote to come out and vote, we are most likely to witness a high number. And then I think at the national level, you see the political campaigns here. And like in 2002 and other successive elections that we've seen, you can see the dynamics are very different because the narratives, you know, of how to bring people to come and vote. But as a result of other things that this country has gone through, like for instance, the COVID-19 and the loss of quite a number of people, we don't expect the same number of voters in the voters register. So there will be cleaning exercise of the voters register. So the other dynamics also will play around in terms of the number of people, you know, who will come out, you know, to vote. And I would like to conclude by saying that it is the responsibility of every voter, you know, to come out, not necessarily to be coerced by a politician to come and vote in a polling station just because the politician has either promised something, but you are convicted to say we are protecting this country because the Constitution gives me power to exercise my mandate of voting and have the kind of the leaders that I would want to be served in an electoral cycle before the next election, because we are doing this for even future generation. But of course, there are other shortcomings that are there, and I like giving this example of the diaspora voters. You know, they have been deliberately left out not to participate in elections. Whereas in other countries, they vote online. they vote by mail. Whereas the people who procure the immigration, you know, permits, the passports for our fellow Kenyans to go to other countries is our own government. At the point of issuance of these passports, why would they not declare where they will be staying and even voting in that particular embassy of that particular country? A simple exercise. It's also the other question when we hear the electoral management body saying that it's a question of money For me, I don't believe that is money. It's the question of lack of political goodwill and also creativity on the part of the electoral management body to enable our fellow Kenyans who are outside this country to participate in the electoral process.
All right.
On that point, Akisa, just very quickly.
Yes.
The period between 2002 and 2007 is very interesting. Because if you remember, 2002 starts in January 2003, with Kenyans being the most optimistic. Because suddenly the old hegemon, the old ruler, the founding party has faced electoral defeat. And the youth are happy and excited. Now, why are they happy and excited? They had been excluded. NAC came in with the language of inclusion. They had been told, you cannot change anything. NAC told them within 100 days, your constitution changes. Corruption is dealt with. And if you remember, actually, we the citizens were arresting police officers. That's what reward, that sentiment of reward does. It makes the citizen proactive. It makes them stiffen your spine and puff out your chest. By 2005, because of these little fights and exclusion and the return of corruption, you remember John Githongo had to flee in 2004, right? Because of it, the referendum happens and the president's party coalition that was banana lost heavily to the coalition that was promising change. And because of that, you then, a program and a campaign like Vijana Tukutuke gets traction. Because they say, you know what? Those guys helped us beat those who are holding us back. So let's vote again in 2007. Just for change. Just for change. But then they feel left on again. But that's it. If we can consistently show that pattern, that for the youth, change again is not like instant coffee. You don't put, your coffee, and your sugar, and your milk, and your water, and suddenly there's change. No. So as I said, we must keep the narratives. So when, for example, Joshua is giving you facts about 2013, right? We must show that actually by voting, you've brought change. Right now, no one is telling them that.
Yeah. All right.
So that needs to be...
I need us to take a short break. Let's hold on to that thought. We're way off to take a break. I want us to take that real quick. We'll be getting back to that. Also, just sampling a number of the views. Quite a number here. The hashtag is front row at Akisa Wandera at KTN News KE. Let's take a short break. We'll be back with more.
This is KTN News. Are you a landowner in Nairobi County? The Nairobi City County Government, NCCG, in collaboration with Nairobi Metropolitan Services, NMS, and the Kenya Revenue Authority, KRA, has granted 100% waiver on outstanding penalties and interest to those who will pay all outstanding principal arrears between 1st November and 30th November 2021. Take advantage of the waiver by visiting us at any of the following service centers. Alternatively, send us an email on landrateswaiver@kra.go.ke or call 0709 014747 for more information. KRA. Tulipe ushuru, tujitegemee.
A robust manufacturing sector is regarded as the silver bullet for economic growth and development anywhere in the world. However, this journey has barely taken off in many countries on the continent.
In my view, it's the failure of government policy and action to support manufacturing investment.
Worldwide, you've never seen any country become a high-income country without investing in manufacturing.
Let's get connected.
Gender-based violence is one of the biggest challenges but people don't want to talk about it. It is complex, it has a stigma, but since the chiefs live near us, they can always tell which home is having those difficulties and they have been supporting us. And I am quick to point out, it's not just addressing those issues for the sake of addressing, but that is how countries get developed, where you treat men and women equal.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back. You're watching The Front Row. Thank you for staying with us. We're on to a last beat of the show here, and we're talking about the IEBC enhanced voter registration exercise that ends today. There was a court order for this process to be extended by a week to the 9th of November, but the IEBC has simply said they will not continue. They do not have enough funds to continue with this exercise. But then how is it that this time round the IEBC has only managed to register only about 20% of their targets? Remember, initially the IEBC was targeting 6 million people, but it has consistently maintained that they do not have funds. So is it time to go back to the drawing board with this? We're asking you here on the show on whether you think there is enough motivation among Kenyans to register and participate and vote in this particular 2022 polls. Do you think the Kenyan electorate is motivated enough to register and elect its leadership? Arakisa Wandera at KTN News KE. The hashtag is Front Row. For context, I want us to quickly brush through some key numbers on this particular exercise that began a month ago, and then go back and look at what our panelists are talking about, because there's been special emphasis on what happened in 2007 and what happened in 2013 and why things are different currently. So the IEBC was targeting 6 to 7 million voters in 27,241 registration centers for a 30-day period, 180,938 new registered voters since 2018, and 7,720 BVR kits were deployed with 8,700 clerks. As of the 25th of October, only 800,462 new registered voters were in the IEBC list. So then let's take us back to 1992 and look at the number of registered voters. Come all the way to 2017 and look at what we are expected to see in 2022. In 92, there were 7.9 million registered voters. The number went up in 97 by slightly more than 2 million, about 3 million new voters to 9 million. Slightly less than 2 million. In 2002, 10.5 million voters were registered to vote in that particular election. The number again went up by about 3-point-something million to 14.3 million in 2007 to 12. Then the number went down for the 2010 referendum to 12.6 million, but then went up again for the 2013 general election to 14.4 million. The number shot up again into 2017 to 19.6 million voters, and from this 19.6 million voters is where IEBC was hoping to add 6 to 7 more million voters onto its list. So then, what was the cost of these elections as well as the referendum? Because the IEBC has consistently said they do not have money. My panelists in studio tonight do not believe that's the case. In fact, they say there are other innovative ways that the IEBC should have engaged themselves in to get results even better than what was witnessed in 2007 and 2013. So the 2010 referendum cost 10 billion shillings. The cost per registered voter was 794 shillings. There were 12.6 million registered voters in that election. Then in 2013, IEBC was allocated 36 billion shilling. The cost per registered voter was 2,500. Registered voters were 14.4 million. Projected voters were 18 million. 2017, the amount allocated shot up again to 49.9 billion shillings. The cost per registered voter was 2,546. And remember, this is when we had 2 elections, so perhaps that's why the figures are a bit higher. Registered voters were 19.6 million and projected voters were 22 million. The 2017 repeat election, again, the estimated 10 billion more was used in this particular poll, with the cumulative cost going up to 3,056. And then in the 2022 general polls, the IEBC had budgeted for 40.9 billion shillings, but they were allocated 26 billion shillings. The cost per voter in the next year's polls is expected to be 1,640, with a projection of 25 million voters. Gentlemen, it is clear we are not going to get to 25 million voters, nowhere near close to what IEBC was targeting. So what next for this commission, Joshua?
Kisa, the figures that have been shown to Kenyans, and those are factual figures, it clearly tells us that elections are very expensive in this country. And they have been made to be deliberately expensive exercises in this country. And not only in the allocation of public money to the electoral management body, but also to the candidates who are seeking legitimacy for elections. Because they put money. And I would want to counter-check with the lack of political goodwill to operationalize the Elections Campaign Finance Act. And that whole cycle has amounted to commercialization of elections in this country, where even our citizenry have been prepared to know that an election year is a year of more money circulation. Whether it's in the campaigns, whether it's to be recruited to be IEBC temporary officials, or to participate as suppliers of goods and services. And that is why procurement becomes a major issue. And the talk of a transaction with the commission during an election, and we've seen that. I mean, 2013, 2017, and even the upcoming one. And of course, post-207, Krekla told us a lot of things that happened in that, the defunct ECK, including having a voters register that included people who had passed on. Yeah. They just resurrected and voted at that time. So we've made our elections to be more of like a monster. A monster in a way that it's like we are waiting for someone to just dictate on what can be done. 40 billion shillings, and we don't get justice, electoral justice in our country. What kind of an investment is this? And I think it is high time we ask ourselves these as hard questions. Because I know in the year 2013, we invested in technology in this country, and we thought that the problem of electoral stealing was over. But it created more problems. Now we are in the narrative of that the servers were done what? That
now
they have
never
even
about
been
bringing
open.
the servers to the country.
Yes.
I don't know how this will...
You review the Supreme Court proceedings of the presidential petition in this country, whatever you hear there in this country, whatever goes on as we prepare for elections, you even wonder why we are spending this much. I mean, this money could have even gone to, rescue children who are dying of hunger in Turkana, northern part of this country. I mean, or even those ones who are being killed in the cattle rustling zones in this country. So, I mean, and compared to other countries, I mean, and I'll give an example of South Africa. They prepare registration of voters as early as age 16, yes, though they are not allowed to vote 2 years before. And then when they attain the age of 18 is when they are eligible to cast their vote. But the registration began way long back by registering, first of all, as citizens, by acquiring the national identity card of the country. And as they do that, they are enrolled into the voters list. But ours is a parallel exercise where we question ourselves to say, Why parallel, whereas these are institutions, I mean, which are created out of public money. The civil registration unit should actually go together with the IBC, because, you know, I mean, it's about data. It's about, now we've created another Uduma number. I mean, so all these numbers, ID number, voters number, Uduma number, all I mean, we are a country of contradictions. I mean, that's how I would just want to observe that.
And Mugambi, because we're saying that we are engaging in a lot of duplicity, and in the process it is very expensive. The question of why can't we have all these processes done at the same time? There's a viewer who's also asked, why do I have to go all the way? For instance, I live in Busia. Why do I have to go all the way to Busia to register as a voter, then come back, then go back to vote? Why can't I just register anywhere and say I will be voting in this particular?
And you know, again, coming back to Article 1 of the Constitution, we are sovereigns. We should be the ones telling IBC, your employees, if I don't go to Busia, make it happen, I don't go to Busia. What are we doing? Because IBC have thrown up their hands and disempowered us in terms of our thinking. Listen, okay, so when you open the show, you remember the figures you gave. That IBC said for registration, they needed 4 billion. They were given only 1.2 billion. Vijay Tugutuke, give or take, cost around 600,000, 700,000 US dollars. Exchange rate fluctuations, that's 700 million. Take it to $1 billion now. That is less than the 1.2 we're talking about. So this is it. And as Joshua says, now that even we have more innovative ways, we've seen M-Pesa, we've seen Fuliza. This thing that you must have a set place where everyone goes and no, on your phone. If you can transact money, you can transact a democratic transaction called registration through this. In banks, we register to be members of banks using our phones. How much is that technology? Pray. How much is that technology? I'm telling you, the problem is not, I repeat, is not lack of resources. It is lack of imagination. And lack of imagination happens in two ways. Deliberately, because there's an investment to make sure that you get the 4 billion because something else flowers from there.
Somebody says we budget for corruption in this country.
There you go. Or sometimes it's not deliberate. It is just the generational gap. We who are now the opinion leaders, the ones who are shaping policy, do not understand our youth demographic. We keep on feeding them lies. They have become cynical. Why would you blame them for the sins of their parents? I think that is wrong. I think, again, it's a total disservice, not just to democracy, but to the whole of Kenya. It's a disservice to Kenya. So my one thing is, the glory of and majesty of a nation, and even an individual, is not that they fail. It is that they pick themselves up, dust themselves up, and strike again. And I'm urging the IEBC, dust yourself up. Do not be insane. Don't do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. Talk to us. Talk to the media. Talk to religious leaders. Talk to political parties. Talk to the business community. Talk to all of us. Talk to the youth. Not at the youth. Talk to the youth. And let them tell you what exactly will be done. It will be game, set, match.
Gentlemen, we have about 5 minutes to go, so perhaps let's just get closing remarks. With just 9 months to the general polls, IEBC seems to be bedeviled by issue after issue after issue. How then do they convince Kenyans that they will get free, fair, credible and verifiable elections in 2022? How can they salvage the situation at this point? We still have time, I imagine. 9 months is a long time. I'll start with you, Joshua.
No, thank you so much, Akisa. Let me say that IEBC needs to come out and identify allies, people who can work with them. And remember, the Constitution does not only just give them the power of administration and management of elections in this country. They require other players. They require the judiciary. They require the National Police Service. They require the elections observers, both international and domestic. They require the media. they require the religious groups, they require the elders, they require the youth, they require the women of this country. IEBC must identify all these players and bring them on board as owners of elections. The elections is not an IEBC affair alone. It is the affair of the people of this country in different jurisdictions. And once that space is accorded, is when we can have free and fair elections in this country. Thank you very much.
Mugambi.
So IEBC must make us believe. IEBC must make us believe that A, they're going to organize a free, fair, credible election. That B, that election will be so credible that it will bring change. Now, that's a different, because that is about political promises IEBC didn't make. But on the first one about a free, fair, credible election, if you treat me as your partner, I keep on saying this. When you meet your wife, for example, or your husband, it is not that they come and tell you, I will do ABCD for you, that they get, as we call it, an anangia kwa box. It is that a conversation ensues where they see themselves as your partner. They envision that you build something together called a relationship. And therefore, where are the partnerships? I keep on asking. And I think that's Joshua's point. If you're not creating partnerships, IBC, you're missing this boat. And the youth are your partners. The youth are your partners. They are not just a dormant constituency to be spoken at. And even, this is why, I might add in my humble analysis, this is why you're finding the youth are in rebellion and banning schools. We're not treating the youth as partners. We're telling them stuff, and by them thinking we're not listening, they're taking the nuclear option. Let us have a conversation with our youth. They will vote, they will register, they will vote, and they will not engage in violence. These are things that can be done based on my own experience with our eyes closed.
So can I look at some thoughts before we close it? Karaoke Moere says IBC single sourcing is criminal and breaks all known ethics in procurement. It is a live crime scene. Well, thank you for engaging with us. We also have Eric Kimutai, who says the youth problem is simply the uninspiring faces of the same old politicians. What is there to inspire us to vote, leave alone to register? We are also reminded of deep state determining the president, so why register as a voter? Mjumbe Hanakosa, calls himself that on Twitter, says, focusing on solutions, what concrete steps can IEBC take to remedy the problem in light of their constraints? My panelists have been able to break that down for us here on the program. Keegan Adi says, there's nothing to do with motivation here. Kenyans are just tired. We also have someone here who says, Mwangi Wangege, no difference, vote or not, there is political indecency. And Dennis Gikundo says, in my view, the politicians should swear and must be forced by the law to implement their manifesto, failure to which they can be removed from office and return public money. Otherwise, if you are voting just for the sake of voting, Kenya will never change and the electorate will lose hope. And he still says, many youth in colleges are complaining of the deep state selecting leaders who are not from the will of the voters and fake promises given by politicians. Let's take a final two. Calvo Macha says it's not the voting that's democracy, it's the counting. In Kenya, the problem is counting of votes rather than voting, so do not blame the youth for this low voter turnout. Donald Lubembe saying no civic education was conducted. On top of that, youth are hungry. They have to hustle hard to get a meal. And finally, Edwin Minor says, what's the point of voting when leaders are sure that one of the presidential leaders cannot and will never be president? In Kenya, there's no elections, there is election. Just sentiments, looking at these sentiments, gentlemen, from our leaders. I imagine it's just a reflection of how people feel. Just 30 seconds each.
Yeah, so I mean, I totally understand the cynicism. What I'm saying is, it is not fatal, it is curable. It is curable if you make people believe. Okay. And you make people believe through reward and consciousness.
Okay.
Simple.
30 seconds.
Yeah. I think for me, if the citizens come in front, not the politicians, that is when we can go far in this country. Because you cannot expect the honor of the country to be manipulated by the people who have just been given a tenure of mandate to offer them services.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Lead the way. If you're watching the show, that's the key message that we're getting here from our panelists joining us here for the conversation. We'll keep an eye on what the IEBC will say and the final data they will release. Joshua Changwonyi is the Executive Secretary, the Constitution and Reform Education Consortium, CRECO, and Mugambi Kiai is the Regional Director, Article 19 East Africa. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. I am Akisa Wandera. I'll be seeing you